Hey folks, it's Mark here. Chris was ill this week, so we weren't actually able to go away and record the episode on video that we said we were going to do. I know that's been 2 weeks in a row now, but we've decided that we are going to put out one of our 7 inches, our split 7 inches that we do for our subscribers on Patreon. If you are not on our Patreon, please go over to patreon.com/unsungpod and check out all the cool things we've got. I don't know if you're aware, you maybe don't listen to the podcast regularly, or maybe you've not tuned in for a while, but both Chris and Dave, they both work in the live music scene. And as you probably know very well, there ain't a lot happening there just now. So anything you could give would be really gratefully appreciated. All these little bits of cash that we can get are helping these guys, just get by the day to day. So seriously, if you have a little bit to spare, then please do send us some cash by donating on Patreon. You don't even need to stay a regular subscriber. You can subscribe for a month and then drop off, or whatever. But there's a lot of cool things on there, so please go and check it out. Hope you enjoy this episode.
I was trying to figure out what to call this split 7 inch, because it was originally, Chris, you wanted to call it Guilty Pleasures. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, dirty secret.
But the problem is that Mark and I have no shame.
Yeah, it is hard to shame the shameless, which is why I said shameless.
Yeah.
I also said redneck, but that's a Scottish thing, and it might even seem like redneck, like American rednecks, whereas redneck,
which was actually an album I thought about. Yeah, yours nearly is redneck.
Double header, yeah.
Well, so basically the idea is, hi, hello Patreoners. This is a little bonus episode. It's split 7 inch, as we call it, and we are all bringing an album to the table that fits a theme.
Yeah, I think this will be volume 1, so we're not going to waste too much time going over all the many that we discounted, because there were a number, especially David, who sent one of those text messages that's just far too long, which was just the first ones that came into his head of awful records that he unironically enjoys.
That inspired me though.
So there you go. So this is each of us picking at the suggestion of, I don't even remember what listener it was, I'm sorry now, it's all a blur, after our City Pop episode and melted my head. It was just basically a record that we listened to that we were a little bit embarrassed to admit that I really fucking like this, and maybe I should have grown out of it, but I haven't.
Or it's just very uncool.
It's whack. But I'm going to, stand by it. I'm going to take the hit. Mm-hmm. So we have each picked one, albeit there were many options, so I'm sure we shall revisit. But we might as well wade in then, seeing as we're not going to preamble with what's it all about with shitty albums and stuff. Some of these are shitty bands, some of these are just shitty albums by maybe alright bands, some are both. Yeah, some are both. So and some are perhaps neither. You decide. So I mean, one of you guys go first.
Dave has.
Well, why? Okay, right. Fuck it. I was like, so I had so many options for
Cards
this.
on the table.
But I thought, what is the one that the two of you are going to think is so uncool?
Yeah,
hate most.
Bearing in mind that David, he is an absolute motherfucker. David, what was it you picked?
I've gone for Snow Patrol and Final Straw. So
even the thought of cutting in the sample there is
yeah, I know. Hey, but this album was a victim of its own success.
Was it? This album was a victim of itself.
So, Snow Patrol released 2 records before. They're from Northern Ireland, but then they moved to Glasgow.
By way of Dundee.
Yeah, they went to Uni in Dundee and then moved to Glasgow. And they were on Cecil Street over in the West End. Yeah. My friend Alana used to live below them.
Well, Fraser Simpson, of our good friends in the band Lato, performed on their fucking Polar Bear album.
Oh, the reindeer section.
No.
Oh no. Oh, the
Snow Patrol album. Back when they were a kind of indie rock band.
Yeah, so they released 2 records, which were sort of fairly averagely produced.
It's a bit of the Biffy Clyros, like a bit of the kind of more interesting, a bit more edgy. You heard them on radio and you were like, oh, this is like a young, energetic rock band. With
quite cool. Yeah, there was like a couple of decent songs on both those records. But then in 2004, they hired a producer called Jackknife Lee, who came in.
Is he cancelled now?
I have no idea.
He's always been cancelled to me. But do you know this guy?
He did Raditude by Weezer, so yeah, I know him. It's a fucking dreadful album as well.
So the first I heard of Snow Patrol was my friend Gordon.
Is he cancelled now?
No, he's not. But at the time, he was in a band called Carson. From Fort William.
Gordon Skeen.
And then he's gone
also
on to
be
Frightened
Rabbit at one point.
Yeah, lots of Glasgow bands, and was in Frightened Rabbit for a while. So he sent me a clip of Spitting Games by Snow Patrol on MSN Messenger.
As you do.
And I was like, oh, do you know what? I really like that chorus. It's really catchy. It's really well produced. It's, what have you. And then he also sent me a little clip of Run. Which was like, oh, that's quite a cool little emo ballad. Light up. But do you know what? The clip that he had,
I think I've heard that one.
The clip that he sent only had the verse. It didn't have the chorus, and it just repeated the verse like 3 times, and it was like a minute and a half long or something like that. And then when I eventually heard this album, I was like, oh, do you know what? The chorus actually pisses me off. But I liked it before, as it was like some sort of just a quiet post-rock song rather than this big epic pop shit.
David, how could you resist the warm embrace of the chorus of Run,
but
sung by a million drunk hen parties?
I know. But basically, when this album came out, they were like, nobody had heard of Snow Patrol when the album came out, and then Jackknife Lee had like took
Vic Galloway had heard of them,
polished them to absolute fuck, made basically got the drummer who's got the easiest job in Britain anyway, because it goes or it goes do. There's no fills in Snow Patrol, and he polished it all up, and he added some little glitchy bits and made the vocals, tuned them up.
There's like an extra credited writer that doesn't appear in the band on a lot of these songs as well. So like, how much was there maybe a bit of steerage from a label or studio, because it's Ian somebody or other. I think he does backing vocals in one of the later songs. I was just kind of curious, and he doesn't seem to be like a band member, so perhaps they were being sort of helped or aided, or maybe he's just like
that goes for a friend. Yeah,
maybe their butler.
But I don't know, I was in 6th year when this album came out, I think at school, or 5th year, maybe, I don't know. My girlfriend of the time bought me the album.
No doubt.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just really liked it. So it's like a fine, average indie album.
At the same time your girlfriend was buying you this album, I was buying my mum this album.
Well, yeah, fuck it, I don't care. But I got it first before it went big, alright, Christopher? Before it went Tesco.
You went in at the ground level, yeah.
You had Chocolate and that was it.
So Chocolate was the one that like became a big hit, wasn't it? Child of 25. yeah, I mean,
sorry,
the problem
I've added the word anus onto the end of every song. So it's chocolate anus. Sorry, you have to like adjust for my notes.
The problem is, like, this is like a band that still had some kind of rough edges, but there were kind of interesting things going on. Like, I really like...
This was rough edges.
No, but I'm not saying it's rough, but like, it's overproduced, but like, a song like Gleaming Auction, which has got like this...
Gleaming anus.
Yeah, I like it. Which has got like this interesting chorus that comes in, and then they just take it away. There's some really I don't know, it's fine, I know it's shit, this is the whole point of it, but like I like this record, right? In a nostalgic way, but also like... Did you play
this a lot when your girlfriend gave you it?
Yeah, it was on.
Did you play it for her sake, or did you play it because you actually...
No, I think it was on in the car, as like with pals as well, like started to drive around in our first cars, and it was on over Christmas time. I remember it was the Christmas that I was also reading Lord of the Flies for the first time for some reason.
You're late to the party.
Yeah. But
I imagine this album soundtracking the creeping ennui of a dying relationship.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, that relationship was dead before it started, to be honest. Like, I look back and go, well, yep, that was a weird one.
How many times have you DJ'd, Ron?
I've never played any Snow Patrol song ever at a DJ set.
Not even at that wedding.
No
wonder the fucking aunties left, mate. No wonder. You could have
I was playing fucking Stevie Wonder and all the good shit. I would never play.
You could have rammed that dance floor with aunties.
No, there was a snake hips
snake pit.
There was a snake hips drunk uncle with a blue velour suit who came up, kept asking for like Stevie Wonder and stuff, and he asked for Michael Jackson.
Oh, you went with him, but no, the aunties.
I had to tell him that
the aunties were choking for a bit of run.
No, there was an auntie who's like, all right, mate, I'm from Liverpool, so could you play the Beatles? I was like, no, fuck off. We're only halfway through Death Heaven.
They did literally fuck off.
Got 6 minutes to go.
But yeah, this album suffered massively from being overplayed.
The songs on it.
Well, and also, yeah.
The band playing it.
But then the band, because it was the next record which came out, which also had like 2 good songs on it. I think it had the one with Martha Wainwright, and then there was another good song on it, but then it had that fucking Chasing Cars song.
Yeah, which I always get mixed up with Run all the time.
That Chasing Cars song fucking haunted me.
If I lay here, if I just lay here, would you lie with me and just forget the world?
There was the next summer after my first year at uni, I worked in like this oil pipeline place, just painting things blue was pretty much my job. I just painted stuff blue, and there was either Radio 1 or Radio 2 on in all places, all around the place, and there were like 3 songs that fucking year that got played on both Radio 1 and Radio 2, and there was only like 10 songs on the playlist, so I would hear each song like 20 times a fucking day. One of them was Chasing Cars by Snow Patrol, another one was The Coral, and another one, I can't remember what song, but The Coral, and then another one was Valerie by the Zootons.
You know what?
And if I hear any of those 3 songs now, I go fucking mental and I start painting things blue out of
You know, it actually sounds probably like a very similar experience to the inmates of Guantanamo Bay had.
Yeah. So, but it's funny, like Snow Patrol now, like, because that song was hugely successful. Chocolate was the first like big hit, and then that song,
Chocolate Anus,
and then what's her name covered Run from
Leona Lewis.
And then they just became a huge mainstream, like a... Do you know what they became? Like an even more boring version of Coldplay, right? They were like Coldplay's a bit too edgy for me.
They basically did the Travis, I think, more than Coldplay. They tried to do the Travis.
They tried to do the Travis, and they just became very, very bland mainstream indie pop.
That second track, whoa, that's a fucking rocker though. Yeah.
there's no one watching as we leave. Say the first thing that comes into your head when you see me.
Well, that's a fucking.
No, I mean,
because the first one, How to Be Dead or How to Be a Dead Anus, sounds.
Don't take us through it. You don't take us through
no,
it.
we do not go track by track on 7 inches.
10 minutes to write that song, but it's such a fucking low energy way to start an album,
Yeah,
a bad album anyway. But then they and like about 3 or 4 of these songs, including Gleaming Anus, they have that kind of distorted bass sound thing that I think they try to use to cover up for the fact that they're very, very boring.
Yeah, well, and all the drums are just like the drums are just copy and pasted beats all the way through, and blah blah blah.
They also do that vocal and falsetto thing. You know, they have like a singing voice at the same time.
But hey,
It's a thing.
do you know what?
A motif,
If
a theme.
if Chocolate never got picked up and they never,
The Doug wouldn't be dead.
no, I don't know. Nah, I mean, it's not a very good album. It's very bland and beige, but it's just kind of comforting for me.
All right.
And that's
I get it.
That's what we're talking about. So fuck it. I would listen to this and I'd put it on in the car and I go, oh yeah, that reminds me of Lord of the Flies.
And then the kids started eating themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Mark,
Oh God.
what did you choose?
I picked Waking the Fallen by Avenged Sevenfold.
Live through you, safe without we lived our lives, without it all turned out. Things are bound to change. Uncovered life.
Which was inspired by your choice of Butterfly, or your suggestion of Suicide Notes and Butterfly Kisses by a Trio, which itself is a terrible album.
Yep.
Fuck me, man.
This record is 1 hour and 8 minutes long.
So fucking long, man.
It's so fucking
I was
long.
at track 6 and I was like, how many fucking tracks are left, man? It's like still 8 more songs to go.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. I went to Manchester to see these guys. I fucking love this band. And then they released an album after this called The City of Evil.
I try to drive all through the night. The heat's of winter weather, the barren empty sign. No oasis in the sand.
And
That was when they went like Guns N' Roses.
basically
Like,
became Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
All the screaming was gone.
Aye.
Pretty much any heaviness was gone, and they completely changed.
what
as a
was the
band.
big one? Backcountry.
Yeah, it was also The Beast and the Harlot from that record too.
And they went, and they also like took up like the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas vibe.
Yeah.
Oh, that's because like Backcountry, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
But
then the drummer died, then they got the Country Dream Theater, which his face, Mike
What
Portnoy.
did their drummer die of?
He was just found dead in his bed. Just like I think he had a heart attack. Yeah.
but Waking the Fallen, so this was like from that.
So
They were like of that early 2000s metalcore scene. Like there were so many bands like Atreyu, and I suppose you went.
Ashes and
Yeah, you went down like the more. Like these are all bands that I've pretty much went to see in the garage in 2004.
Same.
Like Trivium, Bullet from a Valentine, all these
all that
bands.
kind of shit. Yeah,
Avenged Sevenfold were always like a bit more goth.
yeah. I liked AFI, so it made sense that I would like a band like this. You know?
Aye.
I think it's odd though, because this album, I've never listened to this album. I've heard a couple of their songs, but I'm really taken by the fact that the production doesn't really seem to suit the style of the music.
The production's terrible on this record.
Yeah,
it's really
like
thin, isn't it?
thin, and the vocals are like very loud, but not in a way that's like loud and impactful, but in a way that makes the music sound really weedy.
Totally, yeah.
And it's just a really odd production decision. Like it seems like they've tried to produce it like a pop album, but it doesn't sound poppier and more accessible, but neither does it, nor does it benefit the metal side of it.
There's some cool riffs on it, but the production doesn't do them any favours, so they don't really have the punch they need.
Yeah,
the vocals are really like I think M Shadows. Fucking what a shit.
Who's
name.
that?
That's the singer.
M Shadows
is a singer. And his song is called that even to this day. I think he's got an incredible voice.
I prefer it like every commercial like shadows.
I think he's got. I think they're all really good players, and the fact that they wrote this record when they were like 17 or 18, it's like you could show that they were really fucking great. A lot of the screaming was done by the Rev, the drummer. The drummer was called the Rev. Just their fucking guitar player is called Zaki Vengeance.
Hey, they were cool rocker guys.
Zaki.
Zaki
Look,
Vengeance.
they obviously they took
Z-A-C-K-Y.
Yes, Zaki Vengeance.
they took
That's the worst part of it.
aye.
And then the other
They were like,
guitarist.
they took a lot of influence from glam rock,
Yeah.
and like they were doing metalcore, but as a glam rock band, basically, kind of like 18 Visions, but like 18 Visions were more Bon Jovi.
Yeah, totally.
You know what?
Like
The Zaki thing makes more sense, right? Because I've got a few bones to pick with this record, right? But one of them is track 4, Reminiscence. Reminiscence. The fuck is that? Like, so it's like, it's not reminiscence.
Yeah, it's reminiscence.
It's not ruminations. It's not premonitions.
it's not emissions.
None of those words end in issions. And so I started Googling it, right? And there's all these fan forums who are like, guys, what is reminiscence? We need to work this out. Until like they do sort of after a few years of this thread, just come to the conclusion that I think they made a mistake. I think they meant to like write ruminations or reminiscence. And the track's about religions, so maybe like premonitions or I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But it just the word, it was like, it's just such an odd word to look at. Like, what did they think they were writing? Because even if it was like, what's the word for two conjoined words? There's a word for that.
Portmanteau.
Right, portmanteau. So like, it's not even one of those. It's just nothing. It's just fucking stupid. And therefore Zaki.
The whole record is fucking stupid. They're all guitar players called Sinister Gates. So, and he's like endorsed by Schecter because they're a fucking massive band now. They're a fucking huge band. Like legitimately, like almost like fucking Download Festival headline size. They're obscenely big. It's coming from this fucking record, right? This fucking album, and he's got like his own, like they've all got their own line of fucking guitars by Schecter and stuff like that. But
Zaki,
he's fucking left-handed as well. It's a weird thing. So I first heard Unholy Confessions. I think it was on a TV or something like that. Like a pure identikit metalcore riff. Every band's written
the
it.
video is so bad.
Everything's so bad about this fucking record, man.
But that riff, maybe I'll have an ex-girlfriend story about every album that we're talking about here. But I used to go around to her house, and her little brother was learning to play guitar.
Did he have a fringe?
Yeah, he did actually. And he would always play this, and the two of us would play it in harmony because it was like I was kind of teaching.
You were
him how to play
bonding
guitar.
with the guy.
Yeah, I was bonding.
You didn't know where that relationship.
And we bonded
was
over Avenged Sevenfold.
You're cool guys.
I knew it was shite.
You're cool guys.
This is like. When I heard this, like, I had heard this one before, and I think even taking into account the video, which is like basically a montage of like crap emo gestures, it is that like setting in motion that long tradition of like wee guys with fringes kind of alternating between two personas, you know, the one of like this sort of sensitive, misunderstood emo genius, and this like battle ready like metal Viking hero type. Yeah. So it's like you've got the and then you get the like metal guys of that genre never knew what they wanted to be. They wanted to be both things. They wanted to be sensitive and emotional and vulnerable, and like, come on girls, I feel bad too.
And then it became like, Axl Rose, so he did neither really.
It just made me feel bad.
Well, they're all straight edge incidentally. All fucking vegan.
Yeah, which
shit,
is funny,
like
which is
metal.
weird considering they took so much influence from glam rock that their lifestyles were. And like you watch like when they got bigger and they were all like rock and roll, but it's like they were doing it sober.
I remember
which is fucking embarrassing.
I remember in an interview and crying of M Shadows talking about his gym routine when he was
Excuse
on
me, Shadows.
And it's just like, this is like the most fucking stupid shit. Like, and it's quite fitting that they've become so big on the back of being basically a new Guns N' Roses, right? Because like they're just as ostentatious and just as fucking nonsense,
but they don't have the excuse of alcohol and drugs.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like less. I fucking hate Guns N' Roses, but at least give them fucking credit where it's due.
They took as a smack
party,
and went for it.
So that was Unholy Confessions. I like Chapter 4 quite a lot. I like Desecrate Through Evidence as well. terrible names for songs. The whole,
you know what,
the whole second half of the album's fucking terrible.
Desecrate Through Reverence is actually not the worst. Like it just gets bad when he starts singing. But like the metallic part of that song's actually not too bad. And the track was Eternal Rest.
Eternal Rest is really
That's a good
well.
song.
It's quite thrashy, and it actually sounds almost like a different band.
Yeah.
But it's when they're doing their like fucking, like you said, unholy confession, that sort of stuff. The emo stuff. I mean,
But that was like the stuff that drew me in to them.
Totally, yeah, absolutely.
but like the metal stuff isn't that good. That's what kind of gets me about it.
Yeah.
It's like if you, I mean, I'm not.
But for a lot of people, this was like their first foray into metal. So like they weren't comparing it to At the Gates. They were comparing it to nothing.
I mean, and it relies on that. It relies on you comparing it to nothing, because as soon as you've got any sort of like, and I am very much not a connoisseur of metal, but even I know that it's like, fuck man, that's pretty shit. That like the ex-metal riff, like fucking, it sounds like a South Park piss take of a metal band. You know, South Park loved a death metal band onto the show the other day, and it was fucking great.
It was Dying Fetus, was it not?
Was it Dying Fetus? Yeah. So this sounds like a South Park rip of like an emo band playing in a garage in an episode.
Can we just talk about I Won't See You Tonight Part 1, which is just completely fucking like needless in every single fucking capacity you can even imagine. It's like trying to be Meatloaf. It's fucking hideous.
I mean,
but I love it.
Okay,
I love that song because it's like sorrow. It's like, mate.
See, I've got a lot of issues with my younger self. I made a lot of mistakes growing up, and I'm like, what a dweeb, man. I should have stood up for myself more. But listening to this album, I did like my younger self a lot better, because even back then I knew this was fucking mince, and I didn't touch it.
Mince. Totally mince.
I didn't go near it, and so I'm actually
went near Everclear instead. So let's talk about that.
Excuse me, you go for.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
I mean, this album's the same length as Dave's album, more or less, right?
Yeah,
and it feels longer than I think 7 fucking
What are you talking about? The Everclear album?
Yeah.
Everclear album's fucking 30...
I know, it feels longer than an hour and 8 minutes.
Oh my god, you are tripping balls. Hey, first, let's just get a few things straight here, right? Okay. The problem I have here is
what album did you go for?
I went for So Much for the Afterglow by Everclear.
So much for the afterglow. So much for the afterglow. So much for the afterglow. So much for the afterglow.
Which was released in 1997. It was the third album. All right.
when they were in their pomp.
They went off a fucking cliff after this album in a big way. They were dire, and Art Alexakis basically started saying that Everclear was just him. He kicked out Craig Montoya and Greg Etland. Just became like basically the most unpopular guy in Portland by being like a bit of an egomaniac. They were signed by the same guy that signed like Sonic Youth and Nirvana. So really early on they were like pushed as this like next big post grunge sensation. Bush were kind of kicking in at the time. They like opened for Foo Fighters and stuff as well. And their first album, World of Noise, is sort of like Tom Petty doing Bleach by Nirvana. It's like a really rough recording. Really noisy, but it's actually pretty fucking good. It's pretty cool. It's weird. Art Alexakis had started in, I don't know, like rockabilly is maybe the wrong word, but he'd started in kind of like more kind of rock and roll themed stuff and transitioned into this grungier sound. And
Plays a mean banjo.
Does he?
Well, there's a banjo on this record. He's playing.
I didn't know it was him. And then their second record came out, Sparkle and Fade, and it is legitimately, in context of its era, a fucking great album. It's absolutely fucking full of good tunes.
Yeah, I wish I could go back. Yes, back in time. If you used to be the kind of girl that you would never leave. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's got the kind of big Tom Petty vibes. It's got Heartspark Dollar Sign. It had a single called Santa Monica. Which was the one that kind of broke it a bit. It had like tracks like Electra Made Me Blind, Summerland, Strawberry. Like, it was really, really well done post-grunge, albeit it hasn't dated that well. But it would have been a good nomination as a kind of shameless, guilty pleasure, except for the fact it's actually really legitimately good. And the lyrics in it have got a very strange approach in that they're very specific. They're not all based on reality. They're kind of, some of them are like fictional adaptations of stuff. So there's a track on it called Heroin Girl about him finding his girlfriend having overdosed and died, and the police make a comment of just another overdose, and he hears them saying that, blah blah blah, and that's not actually true. None of that happened, but his older brother did die of an overdose, and both he and his mum, when he was much younger, overheard the cops when they were moving the body saying just another overdose. He did have a really hard life growing up, abandoned. The daddy issues thing comes up in loads of the records. A lot of the things that defined Everclear was like, is that the band that always, they were the band that sang about their dad before Papa Roach were a band, basically.
Yeah.
And he had like serious drug issues. He grew up in he was born in Portland, but he kind of moved to LA, and it's a recurring theme throughout, is like them melting down, him almost dying on cocaine, these kind of things. Anyway, so they brought out Sparkle and Fade, which was kind of like, not dark, but like there's tracks on it like Queen of the Air and stuff that are, and I think Strawberry deals with like him being clean for a long, long time and then relapsing really badly and getting in a car accident and things. And it's kind of interesting stuff, and it's quite sincere and it's quite earnest. It was well produced, that album, and it looked like they were going to kick on in a big way. What they then did was they transitioned from like post grunge into like power pop with this album.
Weezer.
Yeah, so like this album was very much power pop. There's tracks in this album that have 40 to 50 layers of guitar. And I mean, it is like a wall of noise. It's like a Phil Spector type, dense, thick slabs of like very, very melodic kind of post-grungy power pop. And I fucking loved it. Like, I loved Weezer at the time. I loved this. It was silly, and it was right at the edge of what I could tolerate, because there is definitely stuff on it that is fucking gormless and OTT, but he's also a fucking great songwriter when he wants to do joyous, exuberant, multi-layered melodies. I mean, even the first song in it, the title track, So Much for the Afterglow, starts with that kind of Beach Boys 40-second multi-layered,
weird sort of kitschy vibe.
Yeah, surfy harmony. And then just has this massive sort of wall of guitar that arrives straight off. The song's got things like, it's got wee na-na-na chants and stuff like that. It's cheerful stuff, but it was a bit more self-aware than the previous album. The track Everything to Everyone had a more kind of broken down pop structure to it. There's a couple of them like that. There's a track in it called I'll Buy You a New Life, which is very kind of spacious, has lots of gaps in the... They don't just play like, here's a power chord, we're going to play it 4/4 to the floor. There's a lot of like little breaks. As you said, there's banjos in it, there's orchestration in it. There's some great brass sections in a couple of the tracks. One Hit Wonder, which I think is the 7th track in it, like just builds and builds and builds throughout the track till it gets to these big kind of horn sections at the end. Mm-hmm. Isn't really pretending to be particularly high-minded. He's a lot of the po-facedness of the second album, which was much more about his drug addiction and his brother's death and his father leaving and stuff. This was more like, we're kind of doing all right. I'm going to be a bit more optimistic. And rather than talking about drug problems and fathers from a negative way, he was like, I've got through that. It was a much more optimistically minded reflection on it.
Funnily enough, when we talked about nostalgia in the City Pop record, and we're talking about 80s being a time of like guilt-free pleasure and blah blah blah, this album to me has like a sort of 90s nostalgia of like, you know, the 90s was that famously the end of history because there was the Western economy was booming and everybody was like taking time to look at themselves and be introspective. So there was like a weird like summery nostalgia to post grunge that had kind of survived the 80s. Felt that, you know, sadness of Kurt Cobain's death, but they're also like, oh, but you know what, we're quite wealthy and things are quite nice.
Well, this is the
blah,
thing.
blah.
One of the reasons I would take this over the likes of Bush and certainly stuff like Stone Temple Pilots and then all the kind of sludgy stuff that followed is, unlike those bands who were still pretending to be angst-ridden millionaires, but angst-ridden, these guys were like actually really upbeat, and rather than going in a direction where they tried to feign that intensity and that sadness, which they'd already done 2 albums about quite convincingly, they just were like, fuck it, man, we're like, let's actually try and be buoyant, let's enjoy being in a band, let's enjoy indulging all these, like I said, Tom Petty and Beach Boys are big influences in these guys. And even though I was like, going back to it, I was kind of cringing a wee bit, and I was like, fuck man, I'm still really impressed with the approach to it. It's totally maximalist. The amount of guitars, the drums are simple, but he was a good drummer. He was just very, very functional, played to the songs. There's a couple of nice wee touches of really fuzzy bass. The arrangement of the album obviously benefits for them being on a major label, but it's actually dripping with really cheesy, optimistic power pop, and I still really have time for it. The last 3 tracks in this album are poor, and I wish they'd just fucking stopped sooner. I don't think there's a Father of Mine, the 6th track in it, I deleted. Whenever I had this, I always just popped that song. But there's like
the most popular song on Spotify.
Yeah, I know, and I've always found that kind of weird that it had a video as well. I never really got that. I felt like there were 9 or 10 really, really strong songs in this album though, that just were a much more acceptable take on post-grunge than all these like shysters that were still pretending to be miserable, and then all that really second wave that followed that of like people moaning and crooning, and they didn't do any of that. They took it in a much more upbeat direction. I kind of respect that. You know, it was still very slick, but it wasn't as contrived and sort of manipulative and insincere, I felt. So,
I mean, I'm truly never going to listen to this album ever again, but I understand. Yeah. I do understand why you would go back to it, because it's got that sort of glossy pop rocky but I mean, going to it for a first time now,
just like that's what it sounds like.
Do you know what? It made me yearn for the excitement of live.
Oh, shut up, you fucking... Don't be facetious. That's my point, though. Bands like Live still tried to do that angsty, tortured, sub-Tool thing, and these guys were like, fuck that. We're not going to debase ourselves.
We're rich as fuck now.
Well, they actually just want to be boring for the sake of it.
You know, Everclear didn't break the way that people wanted them to break, and I don't think they ever really did get that rich. And they had to keep touring. Man,
this got 8.2 on Pitchfork, by the way.
Fair play to it, man. It's like, it is an unabashedly exuberant power pop album. I mean, I think it's deeply flawed. There's 4 or 5 tracks, the last 3 certainly, that shouldn't be on it. But I mean, it's not massively long as well. It's like 43 minutes, something like that. The track Local God, by the way, they had in the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack, the Baz Luhrmann film.
I feel just like a local guy when I'm with the boys. We do what we want. Yes, we do what we want. We do what we want.
That was like how a lot of people found out about Everclear, and that kind of broke them a wee bit. But I don't think they became like massively affluent. One last thing about this album though, these guys had a fucking nightmare touring this album. I don't know if you've heard any of the stories, but it became like a sort of the cursed tour of like comedy sort of anecdotes. I think on one of the early shows when they were in Australia in 1997 for this, Art Alexakis was hit in the face by a shoe that knocked out a bunch of his teeth, like really early on in the fucking tour. And then 2 nights later, somebody threw a lit sort of firework, but like an incendiary thing, like a kind of big firework on stage that badly burned one of the stagehands when it exploded on stage during the set, which had to be abandoned. And so they kind of, at this point, the second guitarist was like, man, I'm having a fucking terrible time, let's just leave. And they had a big argument, but he persuaded them to stay. And then they went back on stage for Art Alexakis' birthday, and while the crowd were singing happy birthday, he was hit in the face by another shoe.
Did he at any point invade Iraq or anything? Like, what's going on?
It's fucking mental, man. And then that was in the Gold Coast that happened. And and then the guitarist left and the band just fucking cancelled the rest of the tour. And after that, he just basically started drafting in musicians and touring himself. But it was a fucking calamity.
A sad loss to the musical community.
But I stand by it, man. I genuinely think it's actually a good record, albeit with problems. And the one that came before it is a very fine example of that. If there is such a thing as a fine example of post-grunge, that's probably one of them.
Cool. Well, thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate it. I hope we'll do another one of these next month.
Yeah,
you don't have to vote or anything on this. You just chat shit.
Just give us your opinions once it goes up.
Yeah.
And all the people that don't subscribe will be jealous as fuck.
Don't throw shoes at shit bands.
No, do.
Oh, well, yeah, actually, that literally had the intended effect.
Throw slippers.
Throw Doc Martens.
All right. Thanks. Bye.